The wind howls through the fjords, carrying the scent of damp earth and ancient stone. It whips through the tangled beard of a colossal figure, perched high upon a rugged mountain. His skin, rough as the granite cliffs he calls home, blends seamlessly with the landscape. Only the faint glow of his eyes in the twilight betrays his presence. This is Finn the Troll, an ancient being who has watched the ebb and flow of life since time immemorial. From his lofty perch, he has witnessed the rise and fall of empires, the march of progress and the folly of mankind. He sighs, a sound like boulders tumbling down a mountainside, and shakes his massive head. "Ah, the Trojan War," Finn begins, his voice laced with sardonic amusement. 10 years of bloodshed, countless lives lost, entire cities reduced to rubble. And what, you may ask, was the noble cause that ignited this conflagration? "A woman," he rumbles, a low chuckle vibrating in his chest. "One woman, stolen away, sparked a conflict that engulfed the known world. Now, I'm no expert in human courtship, but it seems to me that 10 years of siege is a rather excessive way to woo a lady. Perhaps a strongly worded letter, a diplomatic envoy, or even a knock on the door and a polite request for her return might have been a tad more civilized." 7. The image shifts, swirling mist coalescing into the sun-drenched shores of ancient Greece. "The Peloponnesian War," Finn intones, his tone laced with a weary disappointment. A conflict so steeped in irony, even we trolls find it baffling. Imagine, if you will, a people bound by a common language, a shared culture, a pantheon of gods worshipped in unison. One might think such common ground would foster unity, cooperation, perhaps even a shared love of olives and feta. One would be wrong, he states flatly. For 3 decades, these supposed brethren tore at each other's throats, city-state against city-state, ambition and paranoia fueling the flames of war. The air crackles with energy as the scene transitions once more, this time to the rolling hills and verdant fields of medieval Europe. "Ah, the 100 Years' War," Finn sighs, a hint of exasperation in his voice. A conflict so protracted, so utterly pointless, it makes even the most patient troll question the sanity of mankind. Imagine, if you will, a century of battles, sieges and skirmishes, all for a prize so trivial, so utterly inconsequential, it beggars belief. "A crown," he states, his voice dripping with disdain, a fancy hat adorned with jewels and gold, became the ultimate symbol of human vanity and ambition. For generations, they fought and died, not for land or resources or even ideological differences, but for the right to wear a piece of metal on their heads. The scene shifts again, this time to a familiar landscape, England, but instead of the rolling green hills of the previous scene, we see a land scarred by battle, the ground littered with the bodies of the fallen. "The Wars of the Roses," Finn intones, his voice heavy with a sense of weary inevitability. Another chapter in humanity's seemingly endless saga of self-destruction. This time, the catalyst for conflict was even more absurd than a simple crown. He pauses, almost as if he can't believe what he's about to say. "Flowers," he states, his tone flat and incredulous. The air grows heavy with the stench of gunpowder and despair as the scene transitions to continental Europe. "The 30 Years' War," Finn rumbles, his voice laced with a profound sadness. A conflict so devastating, so utterly senseless, it left an indelible scar upon the soul of Europe. Millions dead, entire regions laid waste, famine and disease sweeping across the land like the grim reapers they were. And the cause of this unimaginable suffering? Religion? Or, to be more precise, disagreements over the finer points of religious doctrine. The sheer arrogance, the breathtaking hubris of it all. It's enough to make a troll weep. The scene shifts once more, this time to a land across the ocean, a land brimming with the promise of new beginnings. America. The American Revolutionary War, Finn intones, a hint of irony creeping into his voice. A rebellion born of a desire for freedom, for self-determination, for the right to govern oneself without interference from distant overlords. All noble goals, to be sure. But the spark that ignited this revolution, he continues, a low chuckle rumbling in his chest, was, shall we say, a tad dramatic. These colonists, you see, were quite fond of their tea. So much so that when their distant rulers imposed a tax on their beloved beverage, they responded with an act of defiance so audacious, so utterly theatrical, it would make even the most flamboyant troll blush. The air crackles with energy as the scene shifts to the battlefields of Europe once more, the ground trembling beneath the thunder of cannons and the tramp of marching feet. Ah, Napoleon, a man of boundless ambition, unwavering self-belief, and a stature that, shall we say, didn't quite match the scale of his ego. This diminutive emperor, you see, decided that he and he alone was destined to rule not just France, but all of Europe. And for a time it seemed as if his dreams of conquest might actually be within reach. He commanded armies with a brilliance that bordered on genius, outmaneuvering and outfighting his enemies with a combination of tactical acumen and sheer, unadulterated audacity. Of course, it couldn't last. Even the most brilliant of flames eventually burns itself out, and Napoleon's star, like so many before it, was destined to fall. The scene transitions once more, this time to a desolate landscape of windswept plains and icy waters. The Crimean War, a conflict so poorly planned, so incompetently executed, it serves as a testament to the folly of human arrogance. Imagine, if you will, a war fought over, a warm water port. Yes, you heard that correctly. Russia, that vast and frigid land, desired a port that wouldn't freeze over in winter. And rather than, say, investing in warmer coats or perhaps exploring the concept of diplomacy, they chose to drag several other nations into a pointless and bloody conflict. The air grows heavy with the stench of gunpowder and the cries of the wounded as the scene shifts to a land once more divided against itself. America, the American Civil War, a nation born from the ideals of liberty and equality, torn asunder by the chains of its own hypocrisy. Imagine, if you will, a nation founded on the principle that all men are created equal, yet still clinging to the barbaric practice of slavery. A nation that espoused the virtues of freedom, yet denied those very freedoms to millions within its borders. Is it any wonder that such a nation would find itself embroiled in a conflict as brutal as it was tragic? The world erupts in a cacophony of noise and violence as the scene transitions to the battlefields of World War I. Ah, the Great War, Finn sighs, his voice heavy with a sense of weary inevitability. A conflict so vast, so devastating, it boggles the mind to comprehend the sheer scale of the carnage. Millions upon millions dead, entire generations decimated, all for what? A series of unfortunate events, he states, his tone laced with disbelief. A tangled web of alliances, a healthy dose of paranoia, and a dash of good old-fashioned imperial ambition. Oh, and let's not forget the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, a man whose death, while tragic, hardly seems a justifiable reason to plunge the entire world into chaos. The world plunges once more into the abyss, the horrors of war returning with a vengeance. World War II, Finn intones, his voice a low growl of anger and disgust. As if the lessons of the First War weren't learned, humanity decided to stage an encore performance, this time with even higher stakes, even more advanced weaponry, and an even greater disregard for human life. This time, he continues, his voice laced with a chilling calmness, the conflict was sparked by a charismatic madman with a penchant for genocide and a truly impressive moustache. How such a man could rise to power. How he could convince millions to follow him down a path of such unimaginable evil. It's a question that haunts even us trolls. The scene shifts to a peninsula divided, a land scarred by conflict and ideological strife. The Korean War, Finn intones, his voice tinged with a weary sadness. A conflict that, despite its relatively small size, cast a long shadow over the latter half of the 20th century, a war that, to this day, remains unresolved, a frozen conflict waiting to thaw. Imagine, if you will, he continues, his voice low and somber, a land arbitrarily divided, a people torn apart by forces beyond their control. Brother fighting brother, neighbour against neighbour, all in the name of ideologies that, to the untrained eye, seemed remarkably similar. The air grows heavy with humidity and the stench of napalm as the scene transitions to the dense jungles of Vietnam. The Vietnam War, Finn intones, his voice heavy with a sense of futility and regret. A conflict that more than any other exposed the limitations of military might and the hubris of those who wield it. Imagine, if you will, he continues, his voice low and somber, a superpower, armed to the teeth with the most advanced weaponry the world had ever seen, bogged down in a guerrilla war against farmers. Yes, you heard that correctly. Farmers, armed with little more than rifles and their wits, managed to hold off the mightiest military force on Earth for years. The scene shifts once more, this time to a desolate landscape of burning oil wells and swirling sand. The Gulf War? Finn intones, his voice laced with a bitter irony. A conflict fought over a substance so black, so viscous, it seems to stain everything it touches. Oil. The lifeblood of modern civilization and the curse of the Middle East. Imagine, if you will, he continues, his voice heavy with disdain. Nations willing to wage war to spill the blood of their citizens and devastate entire regions, all for the right to control a commodity. A resource that, if history is any indication, will inevitably lead to more conflict, more suffering, more bloodshed. Finn lets out a long, weary sigh, the sound like a mountain crumbling under the weight of ages. "And those are just the highlights," he rumbles, his voice echoing with the sorrow of eons. "If I listed every war, every conflict, every senseless act of violence humanity has inflicted upon itself, we'd be here until the next ice age. But tell me, little humans, was it worth it? All this bloodshed, this destruction, this endless cycle of violence, was it truly worth the price you paid?" The vision shifts, the swirling mists parting to reveal a scene of chilling familiarity. A grand ship, its hull gleaming under the moonlight, cutting through the icy waters of the North Atlantic. Passengers, oblivious to the danger lurking beneath the surface, sip champagne and celebrate their own ingenuity. "Unsinkable," you said. Finn snorts, the sound like a rock slide. "And yet the sea swallowed you whole. What did you learn? Did you grow wiser? Oh no. You just built bigger ships, filled them with even more people, and hoped for the best." The scene shifts again, this time to a different kind of human folly. A massive concrete sarcophagus humming with an eerie blue light, a monument to human arrogance and the devastating consequences of technological hubris. Chernobyl. "Perfectly safe," you said.